Hi guys, in this video we're going to show you the building of this roof centre console, and we're going to show you it all the way through to the stage it is now, which is pretty much ready for a sand and the final epoxy undercoat before paint. So what I've done is I've cut the rusty inner part off and fairly conveniently and luckily found that this outside skin is in definitely good enough condition to use. I wouldn't say it's perfect, but it's pretty good. So what I need to do is fold up a replacement section. So I've made a pattern that mimics the shape through here and worked out what radius I need to bend around there. So if we just go over to the metal brake, we'll fold it up and sit it in place. I've cut this piece out of a sheet, and this is the area that's going to get folded to replace the rusty part, and then this is the part that goes through to the front of the roof, which is kind of our centre console overhead panel. So I've scribed two lines on here to where I'm going to fold it, and we'll take it over to the brake now and fold it. So that initial fold that I'm putting in isn't quite 90 degrees, so we'll just put it into the sheet now. I'm just kind of going to just guess it. Which I think is going to be about that. A little bit more. Yep. So the next step is to bend that radius on there. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to set up a piece of tube and some spacers on this. What I've done is I've set up what I'd probably describe as a contraption in the metal brake to get that radius I want. So I've clamped the flat spot weld flange into this position here, and then I've found a piece of tube that's going to mimic the shape I want. So that shape there is now sitting there, and you can see the tube that I've got. So there's not really any science involved in this, it's just a matter of bending it and seeing what happens really. So I shall just give it a bend. And before I overbend it, because it's a lot harder to fix once it's overbent, I'm going to check it on the pattern again. Obviously needs plenty more. So what I might do is find a piece of tube, this might get noisy, put it in there and bash it with a rubber hammer. And while I'm doing it, I'm just applying some pressure down on the whole thing. That is quite noisy, isn't it? You might want to turn the volume off for that. So it's doing what I want. So you can hear it. Could you hear the change? As you saw, we used the metal brake to bend the shape here from our pattern. So as you can see, we've got this part of the pattern correct through here. That's all we were after, was just this initial curve, because as soon as it gets to here, if you look at the pattern, it instantly curves the other direction. You guys have probably worked out by now we don't have a vast amount of equipment in this workshop. We don't have big metal brakes or folding machines or anything. And so we generally have to be just creative all the time. So we need to create that shape, and bearing in mind that when we bend something it'll spring back a bit. I've just looked around the workshop and found our trusty argon bottle, and it is full, but we're not going to bash on it with anything. So what we're trying to do, what we're trying to do is bend it around that shape, and we're pretty much just going to do it by feel and by eye. And so yeah, we'll just get into it really. What we really want to make sure that we do is that we don't bend it, even slightly rotate it, it will just not work at all. So what I've instantly realised is we need to put some reference lines on both these things before we start folding it or bending it. So what I'm after is a straight line across here, and I don't want to draw on our rented bottle, so I'll put tape down. When you lay that over that, it will instantly find the straight line, so that's what we're going to do. So now when we lay this on, I'm going to mark it here as well, but we need to make sure it's not skewed when we start bending it. So I'm just going to draw some reference lines on this. I'll put some tape on here, and I'm just simply going to draw I've broken the pen, draw a reference line on that, and I might draw another one down here, put some tape on that, it's going to be too short. Now if I draw that reference there and there, but also mark it there, bring it across to this side, run it down there, that's going to give us, for all intents and purposes, parallel lines. Now we can line these up, and when we apply pressure to bend it, it won't be off the centre line of what we're trying to build. Right, so in my first try this bottle was rolling around a bit, so I'm just going to stop it rolling by shoving something under it, and then I'm simply going to add some more. And see what happens. And it's definitely working, but it needs plenty more. Right guys, so over the last few days I've been working on the roof console in the middle of the truck, and what the plan is to get it fully built before we actually put the roof on for the final time. So I spent 3 or 4 nights on the Google looking at ideas and other cars for roof consoles, and it almost put me off. I just about decided not to put one in. What I didn't like from what I saw was they all looked like they'd been put in as a secondary part. Most of them were rectangle and parallel and square, and what I realised by having a proper look was I thought, well, if we make it part of the steelwork, so it's all welded into the actual original pressings of the internal structure, and also gave it some shape and some angle, it'll just look like it's meant to be there. So that's what I've gone ahead and done. One of the driving points behind bringing it all into one part was, as you can see, and we mentioned in the last video, we had to replace this whole section here anyway. What I've wanted to be very, very careful about was to make it, as I keep saying, make it look like it was part of the original truck, or at least it could have been. So what I've done is I found a sun visor, which we have to have, and it was the right size. It's also got a light with a switch on the actual mirror, so it's a pretty cool thing. We'll get it recovered in leather. But what we'll do is we'll actually sit it up. Whoops. We'll sit it up in here, and so I've made it so when this is up at the right height above this piece of sheet metal and parallel with it, the actual edge of the visor is parallel with the edge of this. So I think that'll look pretty cool. We won't be using this mirror, but it's a good mock-up mirror, as I've made sure that it's pretty much exactly the same width. So it should look like it's all, supposed to be there. The next thing we'll do is make a little hammer form tool to a rectangle shape, which is the size of all the switchgear board, and we'll just put a recess into this, just so when we put the panel up into it, it'll look nice and flush. This part here will be painted same colour as the truck, and if we put an aluminium panel in here for the switches, we could either polish it or brush it or anodise it or paint it. There's multiple things we could do with it. What I was thinking of doing is if we get this panel laser cut, we could get the names of all the switches, for example headlights and whatever else we have up there, laser cut right through it, and then we could have a backing light up underneath it, so at night you could see all the names of everything written next to the switches. It sounds a bit overkill, but I think it'd be quite a cool feature. But in the daytime, when you haven't got it backlit, they'll just look black, so it'll look like there's black writing on there. So what the plan is once this is painted, we'll make up an aluminium or fiberglass panel that's either got leather on it or Alcantara or something. And what that'll do is it'll slide up into here. I can't get my hand in there to make it look exactly right, but it'll pretty much look like that. And this shape here will continue around, run parallel with the door and merge back into this panel here. What I was talking about before, with looking at some of the other roof consoles on the Google, is that they had basically square sides on them, and I didn't like that. So I hammer formed a radius into this, and then this part here is on about a 30-degree angle. So we'll just show you the tool that I made up to form that radius. Once I got the shape that I liked of that main console, I lay it on a scrap piece of Maltica that I found and traced the shape onto here, cut the shape out, and then I've used a router and a radius bit to router a radius onto this. And then the next step from that was to lay the panel back on there, and I actually cut this slightly smaller than the width, lay the panel back on there and literally just hammer formed and rolled with a hammer this edge around that radius. And that's given the whole thing a fairly soft and you know, just a factory style look. Finally finished making this part. We've rolled this around on the wooden hammer form, and then what we've also done is rolled this edge over as well, and where we couldn't roll the edge over through here, we've welded on another piece. So we've actually made it pretty stiff. It's quite a strong and stiff part. We've done some just manual hammer and dolly stretching through this area here just to give it a little bit of curve, and we've managed to achieve that quite nicely. The back window in the cab had we originally thought it was straight, but had about a 7 or 8 millimeter curve in it, and we tried for an awful long time to shrink this area and stretch this area, and I just don't have the tools or the equipment to do it. So what I ended up doing was just cutting it all the way down through here, and taking a moon-shaped part out of it, and then literally welding this back together while it was clamped into the truck itself, and it's turned out perfectly. Once we get all this assembled and we're starting to put the car back together, this is going to be an aluminium panel with all the switch gear on it. And what I wanted to do was have a factory looking recess. This is obviously a steel hammer form part, but I wanted a recess in here where it sits nicely. So that's what we did. We made a hammer form and then turned this whole thing upside down on a big steel table that we've got, and put it in there and literally just hammered it into shape. And it's turned out very well. I'm pretty pleased with it. If we take a panel off and access, and we can access underneath it, we sandblast it and epoxy paint it. And that's what we've done here. So tomorrow's job is to actually fit the panel that I've made up. And so we've sandblasted this area, epoxy painted it. Tomorrow we'll paint this strip through here with our copper weld-through primer, and then we can fit the part. Once it's fitted, we'll never be able to access in that area. We need to do a little bit of final fitment, but this is just about ready to weld in. So once this is fitting flush with this panel here, we'll weld this in and weld up these little holes here which were there for some reason. And you can see the area now that we've got dedicated to all the switchgear up here. And you can also see that we've put this in and it fits pretty much absolutely perfectly with the original outer skin. So that's now ready to drill some holes in. We'll do that tomorrow and plug weld it in. And we can also, I just need to do a little bit more shaping on this part to just improve this radius slightly. Just make it slightly bigger so it's the same radius as this. And once I've done that tomorrow, I'll be able to then weld these edges in and plug weld it across there. So at that point, it's in place and ready for me to start making all the rest of the parts. Once this is all welded in, and once we've got all our perimeter that we're going to build completely finished, what we'll then do is we'll sandblast this whole area all the way around completely, and that will hopefully get rid of every ounce of rust in the whole thing. We'll then epoxy paint it, and once we've finished all the epoxy painting of this perimeter area as well as through here, we'll put some sound deadener in on top of these areas, and we can pretty much lay the sound deadener right up to the edge all the way around, and we'll do all that work before we actually put the roof skin on, because why wouldn't you? The other thing we're going to do before we put the outside skin on is do all the body work, which in New Zealand we call bogging and fairing, and we're going to bog and fair or body work all the internal sheet metal areas, so all under here, all these corners, get everything really nice and undercoated right through to the polyester, or even we'll put an epoxy spray on an epoxy coat on top of it. The advantage of that is that, you know, in however many months or years time that we actually go to paint the truck, all this stuff will just be done. and we won't have to try and stand upside down and have lack of light. It's going to be so easy just to stand in the truck like I am now and actually do it. We're finally starting to make some decent progress on this whole internal steel structure. Yesterday and today we finally welded in this centre section and finished welding on all these corners and dressing it all. One of the things I've started to do also is go through and fill up holes like this, because we're going to paint all this top coat outside colour. We obviously need to fill them all in. What I'm also doing as I work around the whole perimeter is I'm starting to fill in these little holes or pressings, because obviously when we paint the whole thing we don't want to see them. So I'm working backwards through here. What I've done is I've dressed all this area ready to put filler on. I mean, I know obviously you'd normally finish the whole thing and then dress the whole thing and then fill and bodywork the whole thing. What I really just want to do is make it feel like I'm making some progress, is the actual reason. So today I'm just going to put some filler on here, and then we'll give it a bit of a sand in the next couple of days, but it's hardly going to need any. It's just a really, really light skim. You can feel it as it's almost nothing. On the back section of this, I've plug welded and dressed it all, and we've welded it into both sides of the original part. Just got to finish a little weld through there, and on this side it's so badly corroded and pitted, we're going to cut this whole area out. Now the shape of this part here is exactly the same as the shape of this part here, and so even though it's not fitting here, both these sides are the same, and so I think it was simply just different in the original pressing. So when we cut this area here out, we'll make up a new part and weld that in, and we'll obviously make it fit nicely. Now we've finished all the sheet metal area through the midsection, we've applied a high build polyester primer to it, which we've rolled on to give us a very, very textured surface, and we're just going to go through the process of doing a little bit of sanding and filling now. Okay guys, last night we put this high build primer on and it hasn't fully cured because it's been freezing cold overnight, and we've just run out of time for the week. What I've done though is I've just given this little area here a quick sand, just to show you the difference between what we start with, which is this really textured finish, and what you end up with, which is a very, very smooth product that's ready for another epoxy coat. Okay guys, thanks for watching this week. Next week's video we've got a couple of little surprises. We may potentially introduce our final hidden project, and we're also going to get into building the section of the inner roof through and around here. So yeah, thanks for watching. I hope you guys liked it. Please subscribe and we'll catch up with you guys next week.